Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. Today's Daily Doors teaser analysis is going to be a little different, as instead of receiving a teaser for today, we instead received a Q&A from the developers, which obviously is very important as it reveals a bunch of upcoming features in future updates. So, in this video, I thought I'd go over every single new thing we learned from this Q&A about the future of the game, and analyze all of it and provide more context to all of you guys. So, with all of that being said, let's begin. Alright, so the first thing the developers mentioned is that the figure-killing Dupe Easter egg probably won't be added back. Now, in case you guys forgot, when the mines originally released, there was a very rare bug that allowed Figure to kill Dupe through a series of random circumstances. And although this was a very cool Easter egg, it was actually a bug, and the developers removed it. I asked if they could bring it back since it was very fun and very unique, but they didn't like that idea, so I guess this is confirmation it will never return, which really is a bummer, but I guess I can see why they decided to do this. Moving on, the developers next confirmed that in-game translations to other languages probably won't be something that will come soon. Now, as you probably know, many games often support different languages so players all around the world can enjoy the game. However, for Doors, I guess the developers don't have the technical capacities and are too lazy, as they said, to actually add in-game translations. So I guess those who speak other languages, you won't be able to play Doors all too often, but who knows, maybe eventually they'll add translations, but I don't think it's a top priority right now. Next up, this one's actually pretty interesting, but eventually the mines will receive a subfloor of its own. As you probably know, the hotel already has two subfloors linked to it, those being the rooms and the upcoming outdoor subfloor. However, eventually the mines will also receive one because it doesn't have any. But the developer said not in this update, and I assume this probably won't happen for a long while, as the developers have a ton of other updates ahead of this outdoors update, which they could add the mine subfloor in, but I don't think this is going to be a feature that will be coming anytime soon. I just want to make that as clear as possible so you don't get your hopes up. Anyways, moving on, this one is actually pretty interesting. The developers confirmed that eventually the ability to give gold to other players will exist in-game. Now, as you probably know, although players can obtain the in-game currency of gold throughout their playthrough, they cannot give it to other players, so if you have some and other players have some and you want to combine your gold, that's not possible right now. However, eventually it will be, as confirmed by the developers. Now, here's the issue. They don't want the ability to gift gold have anything to do with a UI menu or an item like the tip jar, like many of you have been suggesting. And that makes it really hard to actually implement a feature like this. So, I don't know, eventually gold gifting will be added, however, it's gonna have to be through an intuitive method, as I don't really know what other things could be used to actually transfer gold to other players besides UI and items. But I guess we will see the developers' interpretation of this when this feature does eventually arrive. Moving on, this one is less of an upcoming feature and more of an explanation of a scrapped feature. Essentially, it was revealed a while back that this floor unaffected icon would appear in the modifier menu, and for a long time players didn't know what it means. However, Elsplash eventually, in this message, confirmed what its purpose originally was. Essentially, certain modifiers in the hotel don't work in the mines. For example, as you probably know, in the mines, a bunch of entities got buffed. However, those buffs can be applied to hotel entities through modifiers. And this means that having those hotel modifiers in the mines is kind of useless, as they're basically automatically applied. It's kind of hard to describe, but that's just how I interpreted it. Anyways, that would... sorry. Let me focus. This symbol, the floor unaffected thing, would have been present to signify which modifiers wouldn't transfer between floors because they would be useless between floors. However, it was eventually scrapped in favor of just not offering the modifiers in other floors where they wouldn't be worthwhile. There, I said it. Okay, moving on. Next up, this one's actually pretty interesting, but in case you forgot, Although there are elevators in the hotel to access the hotel and the back door, there aren't any for the mines. And this player asked why, and the developer said it would be really hard to implement, because having giant areas in the hotel dedicated to new floor elevators could be massive spoilers for those floors, and it would just make the lobby unnecessarily big. And so this is why probably the next upcoming floors can only have elevators created through the elevator create screen rather than through physical elevators in the lobby, which makes sense, but the developers were just explaining their reasoning behind that in this message. Alright, this one's a little interesting, but the developers confirmed that there won't be a Doors ARG. For those who don't know, an ARG is a massive multi-website puzzle that can be themed around a variety of things, and they often are fun for the community to solve. However, the Doors developers likely won't do one because they can't think of anything difficult enough to warrant such effort put into an ARG that the players wouldn't immediately solve. Still, the idea of a Doors ARG is really interesting, and I hope the developers revisit this topic sometime in the future. Moving on, this is actually pretty interesting, but the developers confirmed that ranked mode elevators will likely appear in the lobby, so that way players can continuously play ranked mode. Ranked mode is probably one of my favorite game modes of all time indoors, and it's the developer's favorite mode as well. I mean, Elsplash even said that's the only reason why they actually play their own game. It's just because it's very fun. However, after April Fool's ended, no one really played the mode because there wasn't really an incentive to do it. And so, this is basically confirmation that probably in the next update, we'll be able to easily access ranked mode through lobby elevators, which could be fun. I'm also hoping the mode gets an update so it actually incentivizes players to actually play it. But that's just wishful thinking. Either way, ranked mode elevators will be in the lobby. That's the important takeaway here. Next up, this is actually about an upcoming feature known as Stardust. Now, for those who don't know, Stardust is an upcoming currency that could rarely be found in subfloors, and the developers confirmed that it in fact is going to be extremely rare to find, and that's because its primary purpose is to be bought with Robux. I mean, that kinda makes sense given how the developers do use Doors as a source of income, so I understand that. However, they're just reiterating that Stardust for free is going to be very rare, kind of like revives. But I guess we've got confirmation about that, because back when the currency was first released, we didn't really know how rare it was going to be. However, now we know it's really rare. Next up, this one's actually pretty interesting. The developers confirmed that there would have been a Pressure reference in Doors, like officially. Now, in case you don't know, Pressure is probably the most popular Doors-inspired game out there, and the developers seem to be on good terms with each other. However, this Pressure reference was actually scrapped, and I don't think it should have been. Essentially, what it would have been was a painting in the hotel of a blue-colored piece of sushi titled Solus. Now, this is obviously a reference to Sebastian Solus, a character from Pressure who is a fish. So having a piece of sushi would be a fun nod to the character and also a little dark. I don't know, it would have been funny, and I kinda wish this would have been added to the actual game instead of being scrapped, as it would be a fun nod to Pressure, as Pressure has a ton of references to Doors, so I think it's only fair if it worked the other way around as well. Anyways, this next one ties back into gifting gold. However, the developers finally caved in and said they might do it through a UI menu, which makes a lot of sense. For example, you could open a UI menu to select players to gift a certain amount of gold to, or something like that, I don't know. Either way, this is probably the method gifting gold would be implemented through. I'm not sure how to describe it, but yeah. So yeah, I guess you can gift gold through a UI menu. Nothing much really else to say, so let's just move on. Alright, this one is also about gold, however I think the developers are being a little sarcastic here. So this player suggested that they should make gold shared between all players, so every player can take out of a shared gold pile, and every player can contribute to that shared gold pile whenever they pick up gold. Now, the developer said this is a good idea, however, I don't know, it doesn't really seem like it. Like, imagine you spend all this time collecting gold only for some random player in your team to just immediately spend it all on themselves. That wouldn't be that fair. So I'm pretty sure they're being sarcastic here. However, a shared gold pile definitely would be a little interesting. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you think this is sarcasm. But yeah. Anyways, moving on, this is just confirmation that items from ranked mode will be implemented into the admin panel in the next update. The developers have said this over and over and over again, however, I thought I'd include it again in case you forgot. But yeah, so we'll be able to use items like a 90 stop sign in the Golden Blaster in a normal game through the admin panel whenever the next update releases. And this is probably the most interesting thing, at least in my opinion, besides the mine subfloor thing. Essentially, as you may know, in the nest, the soundtrack actually gets more intense the more you complete the nest. Like, the more anchors you solve, the soundtrack gets more intense. That's what I mean. However, there's actually an additional step of intensity in the soundtrack that doesn't actually currently exist in the game, which this player knows as Phase E, since those soundtrack intensities are labeled by letters. For example, the first intensity is Phase A, notified by completing the first anchor, denoted as Anchor A. So there is no E anchor, however there is a E intensity soundtrack. And so the developers said that this soundtrack might be implemented in a future update into the nest, meaning the nest could be seeing an expansion sometime in the future. This sounds really interesting. And since the Phase E part is technically a secret, it could mean that this expansion of the nest could be like a secret DLC or something like that. I don't think DLC is the right word, but like a secret that's optional for players to partake in for extra rewards. I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, but a secret expansion of the nest would be very interesting. And I would love to see something like this, especially since Phase E of the soundtrack sounds really good. I don't know if you heard it, and I don't have access to it right now, but it is one of the best soundtracks in the game. So I would love to see this be officially added. But yeah. Oh, and that is the entire Q&A. So, to summarize, the key points you should take away, or the most important points I'd say you should take away, I guess, is that this nest expansion could be coming, of course, the ability to gift gold to other players, eventually we'll receive a mine subfloor, and I don't know, I think that's it. Anyways, let me know in the comments what you think of all these features, as well as this unscripted video format. I typically do these for these Q&A videos since there's so much content to cover that a scripted video would take ages to make. So let me know what you think of these types of videos. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.